Hi, I'm Elena Romero.
And I'm Tuffy Questell, and welcome to the Hip Hop Subway,
The L Line.
This special 6-part series celebrates the 50th anniversary of hip hop, presented by LATiNAS and CUNY TV. Today, we'll continue to examine the global phenomenon that is hip hop from every angle and specifically through the Latino lens. Today, we're getting off at the final stop on the L line, graffiti, activism, and the future.
Graffiti is the cultural art form of hip hop, and it's an artistic expression that has often been seen as a form of vandalism, but it is a form of resistance. Today, joining us are some of the pioneers, the writers and experts of the craft. So let's get this party started.
We have Latina and hardcore New Yorker Lady Pink, who tagged subway trains from 1979 to 1985 and is a cult figure in the hip hop art world.
We also have graffiti artist Tony Cruz, known as RAM2, a world-renowned commissioned artist who has created over 200 murals painted in the Bronx over the last 3 decades. Plus, we have Anthony Feliciano, also known as COSE of the TDS crew, a New Yorker writer since 1979. Welcome.
Welcome, guys. Welcome, Mel.
Thanks for having us.
So let's start from the very beginning. What role has graffiti played in hip-hop?
Well, anybody that knows anything about hip hop, it has several elements. Graffiti, the number one element, it's the first element, very first element.
Ram?
I see that the role graffiti art has played in hip hop is basically like creating a platform to express, your experiences in your hood. And now, it started out in poverty, and now it has gotten, around the world. And I think that we got to continue to preserve that and take it to the next step.
Lady Pink, your thoughts?
Graffiti was around a decade long before even the term hip hop was coined. So 2 different elements. Graffiti was only relevant all over New York City, but hip hop only hit some neighborhoods.
The art itself, the graffiti, the graph, how has it changed over the years?
The art has evolved so much that at 16 years old, I would have never dreamed that we would be on a worldwide platform. Back in those days, we were all city. That means all the boroughs. Now we're worldwide. We have social media, we have the internet, we have people like Lady Pink. I remember seeing her trains with Crash Days, Kel, Mayor, all these people, the movies she's been in, and she's worldwide. I never thought of that. I was a teenager. Nobody thought of, that they're gonna be one of the most sought out art forms in the world right now. People called us vandals, but now it's not only vandalism, because it's still a vandalism if you're doing it illegally, but it's also a recognized art form. It's known throughout the world and it's evolved.
What I see is that graffiti has been bridging the world together more. It's bridging more cultures. We have a responsibility for humanity of how we're going to continue to preserve and channel this graffiti energy. And what I'm referring to is using art as purpose. To me right now, I started a vision protection campaign. I was invited to speak at the United Nations to protect our eyes from the blue light, LED light. I have blindness in my right eye going on 15 years, but I took it and flipped it to a positive, and that's what I preserve. The essence of hip hop, to encourage and uplift yourself and others, what I witnessed in the 70s. I'm celebrating 44 years of graffiti. In the 70s in the South Bronx was to uplift, engineer yourself, pick yourself up, and share it with others.
Lady Pink, where do Latinos fit in the narrative, especially women?
Well, women have been involved in graffiti since the 1970s. I am not one of the first females to do graffiti. There was dozens and dozens of ladies writing before me. I started in 79. And the movement was already full blown. There were top to bottom whole cars, entire trains being painted by guys. I had a lot to catch up to. But in the 80s, it all went above ground. It went legal. It went into the galleries, motion pictures, documentaries, books. We were traveling the world like celebrities, and it hasn't stopped since. It's been over 40 years, and some of us have made a career out of being artists. It's all considered street art now. Graffiti was the very beginnings of it. But at the time, there were other street artists, Keith Haring, Basquiat, Jenny Holzer. There were other people working with different mediums. Graffiti is all about spray paint style and hopefully hitting a train or something that rolls on wheels. And now it's been elevated to contemporary art. It is in the finest museums. It sells for in the 6 figures. And I think that we're doing very well. No one could have predicted it would have gone in this direction in the future, but here we are.
How were we able to transition the art form from being considered a form of vandalism to being a legitimate craft and recognized internationally and globally, worldwide?
It has always been an art form. Only when you do it without permission and the surface doesn't belong to you, it's illegal. But as soon as you're given permission, the very same thing, it's art. So we elevated it into the galleries and museums, not by our own deeds, but by outsiders who saw the value of very, very pure art coming from children, literally teenagers, without any kind of training, inventing art, inventing visual art, inventing dance and music. All of this was just made up by kids. One of the very few art forms that were born in America. We can all be very, very proud that we have birthed a different culture here.
My question is, how do we preserve the art form? I'm still a little broken about what happened to 5 Points. When we lose something like 5 Points, which was the mecca of tagging and art, and it's like, you know, losing Tompkins Square. It's like losing a park, like losing a part of the city.
I'll tell you how to preserve it. You see what they're doing in Wynwood, Miami right now?
Is that Art Basel?
Yeah, Art Basel.
Okay.
I went there and I was in a whole different world of graffiti. And that's why the Bronx is the mecca of hip hop, where we have to make this the mecca of hip hop. I travel around the world, and the Bronx, with all respect, we need more representation. So what they done in Wynwood, with the art all over, artists from all over the world also coming in, but mostly the artists from the Bronx. That's what we need to have these, you know, what the Universal Hip Hop Museum is doing right now is great. We got to continue focusing on triumph, how we're going to triumph from preserving the art form. But you know, that's one of the ways to do it. The community got to get together, organizations, you know, the artists in the furniture stores and doctor stores all over the place.
Copy that. COSE?
So that's where you guys come in. You know, you allowed us to come here and express ourselves and our points of views, our perspectives, and you guys are playing a very pivotal role in helping us, the so-called 1980s vandals, you know, that are now professional artists, you know, because that's what I do now. I do art shows, I exhibit, I curate shows now, and it's my job, I feel, and you guys are helping us to get the word out. You know, you guys got this amazing platform where we can speak and share our thoughts and ideas and our plans of what we want to do moving forward.
Lady Pink?
And you hand it down and teach the young. So that is how we preserve our work. We collaborate together and we maintain and keep our culture so that the young people pick it up. For a while there, we thought breakdancing was going to die and vanish off the face of the earth, but the young people picked it up again. And the vandalism hasn't stopped. Graffiti is alive and well, running on subway trains in other countries, in Italy. In the States, it's on the freight trains. It is wild, it is free, graffiti is out there, but otherwise people can use it as a launch pad to have a career and to break into the arts.
Listen, I love you all. I thank you for your contributions, and I thank you for carrying the torch. Please continue to do so. And thank you for joining us today. We really appreciate it. And let's continue to do this. Let's talk and build and figure out how we can help to carry the art form further. We'll be back with more on the hip hop subway, the L line.
Welcome back to the hip hop subway, the L line. We just talked to some prolific graffiti writers in our earlier segment and learned how the art form can be a form of resistance. Since art is a powerful force in social activism, we want to take this conversation a bit further with guests who have made it a point to affect change and advocate for communities of color. On Zoom, we have Afro-Boricua activist Rosa Clemente, who has helped bring together more than 3,000 activists to create and implement a political agenda for the hip-hop generation. Plus, we have hip-hop artist and activist Power Malu, who educates and guides young activists fighting for racial and economic justice in New York and worldwide. Welcome to you both. So we'll start with you, Rosa. What does hip-hop activism, how does those two words go together?
I think it's instructed to first, the history of the term itself comes from Harry Allen, who was the media assassin for Public Enemy. And he coined the term in the mid 80s to late 80s, when particularly the culture was really coming to terms with particularly mass incarceration and stop and frisk and window broken policies, particularly in New York City. So the policies of Ronald Reagan and the United States government obviously impacted my generation, and the hyper speed of which mass incarceration took place with Reagan and then Bill Clinton. So, essentially, it's those of us, like, you can't separate who we are. We're born into the culture, and we have the intersection of all the politics, So I think as the music began to address mass incarceration and also the crack epidemic that was imposed, particularly in South Central LA, and police units becoming more militarized, where you begin to see then the beginning and then the explosion of hip hop activism.
Power, how is hip-hop activism?
So basically, I'll take it a little further. It was born out of necessity, right? Out of poverty. And when you think about, say, the Rebel Kings, for example, the Ghetto Brothers, and you think about the different gangs that were in the Bronx and all over New York City, period. This was an era and a time where people needed to figure out a way how they could speak out and speak up for themselves, because no one was representing them, and they were the forgotten people. We were basically, I say we, I wasn't there at that time, I wasn't born, but during my history and doing history, I learned how people needed a voice, and they needed to figure out how they can speak up. And so when you think about the meetings that were had, there was one particular meeting in the Bronx, in the Hunts Point area, where you hear a lot of the gang leaders and gang members becoming activists, speaking up for themselves when they were getting interviewed, and they were talking about everything that was going on and talking about uniting instead of fighting against one another. And so the culture existed, but the term existed later, as Rosa explains it, but we are part of that culture of speaking up and being reporters of our own neighborhoods and trying to figure out how we can yell out louder so that people can see that we exist, and then create our own, and which is exactly what we did, putting away the leather vests and the knives, and turned it into more of the dancing and going into the park jams, and everything just kind of morphed into what it is now. But it came out of necessity. It came out of just us being on the street with nothing, with just playing in the rubble, and just a cry for help, and then figuring out we have a voice, and let's figure out how we can use it and unite ourselves to empower one another, whatever Black, white, Latino, anybody that was in that time and in that period, we used it as a way to unify.
So what is hip-hop activism now, and what does it look like?
Hip-hop activism is Rosa Clemente, is myself, is using our platforms to be able to uplift others and to be able to bring awareness to different things that are going on. I'm a New Yorican, so I come from the New Yorican Poets Cafe era. I know my history with Miguel Piñero, Miguel Agarin, all the founders, and just, Bimbo Rivas, everyone that used that platform of poetry to speak up and speak out and be proud of where we're from. And now hip hop is a worldwide culture, and we have the responsibility to uplift each other and to hold true to what the roots of hip hop is. And so activism and hip hop activism and the opportunity that we have is really important for us to take that responsibility and share it and teach the youth who are the next ones up, so that we can evolve as a people.
Rosa, I want you to add to that and speak specifically around the issues affecting our hip hop community.
Yeah, I don't really refer to myself as a hip hop activist anymore, because I made a very purposeful choice a while back to no longer engage at a lot of levels in the culture. unfortunately, like the Me Too era still hasn't hit hip hop, and it became an untenable space, especially for a lot of us as women. Now, us as activists and artists, we're going to do what we're going to do, but for me as a woman, it became too physically and mentally dangerous for me to be caught up and be part of how I was part of it for a very, very long time,
I get it. So what are your goals as an activist and your hopes for the future?
What I'm trying to do as an organizer is how do we evolve at this point? Like, how do we not particularly focus on the hyper-materialism and hyper-capitalism in it? How do we create maybe a new generation of younger people that are coming up that, like us, will begin to see what could be the most pressing emergency at this current moment? And for young people, it's the environment and climate catastrophe. You know what I'm saying? So I hope that I am being honest, but loving the culture, loving the people, not necessarily loving all the people or the hyper capitalism and materialism that's kind of gotten a grip on it, but also like how, not only how do we evolve, how do we like for young people to maybe shift what the culture is supposed to be, right? And like what we should be doing more and what it looks like to fight for freedom, because ultimately that's how the culture was created, to fight for freedom out of a mindset of poverty. And then we created $1 billion culture that unfortunately has not still changed the material conditions of most of our people.
And we appreciate everything that you've done, Rosa, for our community. Power, last words.
Well, my organization, Artists, Athletes, Activists, are currently helping the migrants that are coming into New York City. We need to stop the divide and conquer tactics that are being used. I think that a lot of people that helped hip hop grow to what it is now come from these different countries and backgrounds, and we owe it to ourselves as a sanctuary city in New York City to help the unhoused community that have been here, held hostage in the shelter system for years before the migrants got here. And I think using my platform, which I learned from hip hop, and using the hip hop culture to let that global message get across to everyone to understand that we need to get away from the me, and the ego system and get with this ecosystem, which is what hip hop has always been about. And let's continue to help one another, and let's continue to help each other grow and be able to check each other, hold each other accountable so that we can evolve as a people.
Well said. Thanks for taking the time for chatting with us. We'll be right back. We'll talk the future of hip hop on the Hip Hop Subway, the L Line.
So where do we go from here? Throughout this series, we talked about the different pillars of hip hop: photography, fashion, DJs, MCs, dancers, graffiti. So what does the future truly hold? To answer those questions and more, we have Rocky Bucano, the founder and executive director of the Universal Hip Hop Museum. Welcome, brother.
What's happening, Tuffy? How you been?
Never as good as you, just trying to be there. Listen, I'm so blessed to see you doing this. I think about you and Sean LG, and this process has been amazing. And I know it's been painful and never really painless, even when it's going great, even digging the dirt, even breaking ground, even all the concerts. It's not pain-free. It's got to be a process.
Well, listen, I don't call it anything that requires hard work doesn't come easy. It took us 14 years to get to where we are. People don't really know the entire journey, but it's building a museum doesn't happen overnight. And building a museum that is so important to culture, like the Universal Hip Hop Museum requires a lot of planning, a lot of funding, a lot of resources, a lot of creativity. It requires just, dedication and commitment from so many different people besides myself. So, what's most important for people to know about the Universal Hip Hop Museum is that it will serve as a shrine for understanding of what hip hop culture actually is. You know, we had so many discussions about graffiti and, you know, dance and fashion, and people, you know, most people who are ardent supporters and fans of hip hop understand how the synergies of those different aspects of the culture exist together. But for so many other folks who are on the periphery of hip hop, really don't understand the connections between them. And that's what the museum will do. It will show people how the culture, you know, was born, how it evolved, who are the architects and the pioneers that helped to create this culture, who are the people that were behind the scenes like yourself and other people who helped to elevate it, and you know where we are today in terms of how the world accepts and understands what hip hop is.
I love that. Now the funny thing is this is going to be a serious conversation for a lot of people. Will you, and I know you might not expect this, will you contradict what the world has said? Like, Herc was the first. There might have been Flowers. There might have been a lot of people. You know, was it really on, you know, on Cedar Avenue? Was it really, you know, was it really Bronx River? That's going to be fun for you to kind of decide this is the real history. These are the things that were left out.
Well, let me just put it this way. The history of hip hop is complex. There is no, you know, everyone knows that Kool Herc is one of the architects, but he's not the only architect, right? So, you know, I come from a DJ background. I started in the early 70s. My cousin Pete DJ Jones was one of the top mobile disc jockeys here in New York City. But would you say that he was hip hop? You would say that he was a precursor to hip hop, the same as Grandmaster Flowers. He was, which was one of my best friends, by the way.
Nice.
You know, he was a precursor to hip hop. And then we get into the whole complexity of who was first, who's second, who's third, who's fourth. You know, Flash is the, you know, the master of the cut, but he says he started scratch, and then you have Theodore that says he started scratch, and you have DXT that says he started turntablism.
That's right.
Right, so, but they all played a important role in the evolution, and that's what people will have to understand. Unfortunately for us, you know, there are so many different stories that we have to kind of like dissect and, you know, add some additional information that people did not get so that people can make their own determination on what the story actually is.
Gotcha. Well, I'm hearing all kinds of stuff. I'm really excited about it. When will the official opening date? Do we have that?
So, you know, we have our design team, our architects working on it. The building is being built at the Bronx Point as part of a mixed-use development project. The housing component, the core and shell of the museum is all finished. It will take us about 18 months, but we'll have some sort of soft opening at the end of 2024, but the official grand opening probably will be early 2025.
First of all, I'm excited. I want to get one of the first Universal Hip Hop Museum badges or bus passes or whatever we call it. First of all, a lot of people don't know. You talked about you were there. You DJ'd. You did a lot of stuff. I mean, Strong City. You Jazzy J. I mean, you've done everything. What haven't you done in hip hop?
Well, I haven't created a film. I haven't written a book. I'm writing a book now. I'm writing a memoir about my entire journey. It's called Resilient. And,
Great title.
you know, to me, I've always been a person who enjoyed being in the background. You know, I don't really necessarily need to be known, or I don't really care about any of that stuff. You know, my work is really about how do I use my position in the culture to make sure that other people are known.
No doubt.
Right? You know, so that's what a museum director does. It makes sure that the history of other people are elevated and understood and amplified, so that the world, when they come visit a museum, they get a deeper understanding of who that person is, what their contribution was to the culture, and how they helped to amplify it or create the vision or whatever the story is. Everything in hip hop is not beautiful.
Very true.
There are some dark sides to the culture. There are some positive sides, but our job is to make sure that people have a clear understanding of the good and the bad, because without bad, there cannot be good, and vice versa. Without good, there can't be bad. So my vision, my goal is to make sure that when people come to the Universal Hip Hop Museum, that they have an incredible experience.
Amen.
It's all about the experience. We want people to come there and, you know, whether you're a 5-year-old or a 85-year-old, you know, you want them to come in and feel like they had a beautiful journey. And that when they leave, that they have a different perspective on what the culture is, and maybe even have a different purpose about how they can help expand the culture and keep the culture going for the next 50 years. Because we're selling the 50th anniversary,
Right.
as documented by many historians, but it's all about the next 50, the next 100 years. Where's hip hop going to be when the culture reaches those milestones?
And because of your contribution with this museum, your name will be aligned with that for a long time to come, which I love, brother. Thanks for joining us, Rocky. It was such a pleasure catching up and hearing about UHHM's future. Oh, such a bright future.
And it's always time to build at the Universal Hip Hop Museum and here at the Hip Hop Subway. But unfortunately, we've run out of time and at the last stop of this subway ride, or at least for the moment.
For the moment, yes.
Right?
It's been amazing.
Seeing this culture through the Latino lens has been quite a treat and privilege to share with all of you.
I'm Tuffy Questell.
And I'm Elena Romero. Until the next ride
ride
on the L line.